Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello, and welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I am so happy, as always, to be here with you. It is such an honor to spend each and every week with you and journey through this great spiral of life, this wild ride. And I don't know about you, but it's felt a little bit like a Mercury retrograde lately. Mercury being in the sign of Scorpio has been quiet and deep and penetrating and emotional, especially with Mars there as well. We've had Mars and Mercury dancing in Scorpio. We've had this Grand Trine in water between these two planets and Jupiter and Saturn. That's been bringing up a lot and giving us space to really work through a lot, to be with a lot, to acknowledge and feel and sense, and maybe not even try to make sense of, but just sense into what we're actually feeling, what's happening internally. It's been this quiet, emotional, penetrating, deep experience. And that's what it feels like when we have two of our inner planets, our personal planets, in the sign of Scorpio. And Scorpio is the underworld. It is death and rebirth and transformation. It's the unconscious. It is alchemy and change. It's the shaman of the zodiac, but it's also fixed and can be stubborn and can be intense and penetrating and controlling and attached. If you know any Scorpios who have either Sun or Venus or Mars in Scorpio, they love hard, but only when they feel totally and truly safe. And that attachment is strong. It's a strong bond. And it's transcendence. And so when we are in the season of Scorpio, like we are now, we've moved out of Libra season and we are fully in Scorpio season now. We are moving through the deeper layers of our psyche, our body, and our somatic experience each and every day. The veil thins in Scorpio season, especially as we near Samhain or Halloween. This is the time of the unseen, of our ancestors, of moving beyond where we've been before. Evolution, change, healing generational trauma. And for my Pluto and Scorpio people, if you're born between 84 and 95, you likely have Pluto and Scorpio. And this is the generation that breaks the generational curses. And I love talking about this during Scorpio season because, of course, our Pluto gets activated. We are in the underworld in an even deeper way than other people. When we have a lot of fixed energy in the air, it's squaring that plutonic energy of Pluto and Scorpio. So we are here to break these generational patterns. We are here to heal the wounds of the past. We are here to go deeper. If you think about it, when this Pluto and Scorpio generation came to maturation, I say we don't really come to maturation until after our Saturn return. And of course, there's much maturation that happens until we leave this earth. But in our 30s, our Pluto begins to mature in a deeper way, and we start to really embody what our purpose is here. And if you have Pluto and Scorpio, your purpose is to go deeper, is to transmute more, is to heal more, is to do things differently, to challenge the status quo, how things have always been done. I posted something on my TikTok. Yes, I actually have TikTok. I don't know how it happened, but it did. And it's actually kind of fun. And I just don't really engage a whole lot with it besides just the few little circle of people that I've found on there. But it's been fun to explore just a different way of engaging with people. But I posted something about if you have Pluto in Scorpio, you're here to break the generational trauma. You're here to break the patterns of your lineage that are not serving. Of course, we have incredible gifts that we've received from our ancestry as well. I do a lot of ancestral work in my client work. We're always working with our ancestors because we're always working with the deep core roots of the patterns that we are here to move through and evolve. And when we get to that core, there's almost always ancestry, there's inner child work, there is past life work. And so we're always acknowledging our ancestors and the work that I do with my clients. And oftentimes we inherit these beautiful gifts, this wisdom, this nutrient-dense material that we could not have cultivated in our own lived experience that was passed down to us through our genes and our DNA that was inherited through past lives. But there's also a lot that we're here to work through, to release, to rewrite, to reconfigure. And this week in particular, as we lead up to Samhain, we experience this thinning of the veil. We get to interact with our ancestors, those patterns, those core wounds in a deeper way. Oh, that's right. Going back to the TikTok post, I had hundreds of people comment and mention how they are breaking the patterns of their lineage. And it's incredible. And it's so fascinating because they were telling me what house it was in, and the work that they're doing in a deeper way is associated with the energy of that house. So astrology is incredible. It was really fun to engage and interact with people. I truly believe that Pluto reveals our deepest, our greatest evolutionary work in this lifetime. And this is coming from someone with Pluto in their first house. So it's a big part of my experience here. And Scorpio is ruled by both Pluto and Mars. Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. It is the deeper, unconscious, greater life themes, more zoomed out experience of Mars. They both deal with power, will, control, drive, sexual energy, creative energy. And Pluto in particular really deals with these greater life themes. The core wounds, the ancestral patterns we are here to work through, what we are here to heal, how we are here to evolve. And we don't really have any super significant aspects to Pluto at the moment. It's still very much activated as we move through Scorpio season. And we deal with the deeper core layers around power, attachment, will, drive, sexuality, fire, feeling, and truth. Scorpio is, of course, a water sign, so it's deep and penetrating. It deals with the emotional body. After the Venusian journey through Libra, finding pleasure in relating, mingling, exploring, and examining how we relate, we dive into the depths of Scorpio. And this is icy water. We enter the 8th house of the subconscious. We get to see what's beneath the surface of this lived experience, not just going out and socializing and living at the surface, but really beginning to connect in a deeper way with self, with others. I always feel like Scorpio season is after the honeymoon phase wears off and we start to see the subtle surfacing of the other person's patterns, and it becomes real. Scorpio is death, rebirth, transformation, change. It's fixed water. The 3 archetypes of Scorpio are the scorpion, the eagle, and the phoenix. And this doesn't mean that we are only at one stage of that journey. We're all of those archetypes of Scorpio. That's how archetypes work. It's integration work. It's not just embodying one, but acknowledging that self carries all of these archetypes and acknowledging and integrating the different parts. Scorpio can be ruthless but honest, real, deep, manipulative, destructive, healing. The first stage, the first archetype of Scorpio, is the scorpion. It's close to the earth. It can be reactive, quick to sting, hidden, reclusive, protective over the ego. If you know anyone who lives mostly in this archetype of Scorpio, you never quite know what you're going to get. Once the ego gets threatened, that tail whips back, and it can feel like a true sting. It can be startling or jarring or scary even at times. The eagle archetype is more evolved. It's still fierce, but also able to rise above the fight or flight, the survival, and see the wider perspective. But it's still operating from survival and still operating from the ego. But it spends more time in that evolved, zoomed out perspective. And the phoenix is the true alchemist. It's able to dissolve the ego. It can dissolve self to find self. It is transmutation through being present with and embracing the fire, the conflict, the challenge, the pressure, the difficulty. It is the conscious warrior that uses its subconscious material to transform rather than avoid or protect. It is true detachment. The highest expression of Scorpio is the alchemist. She transforms again and again, turning lead to gold, turning density to light. And Scorpio and Pluto truly transmute lead to gold. It's the transformation of self at the core. It shows us that we must face death to transform the ego, to be reborn. It's more subtle and old, often not conscious, but immensely impactful. And it's important to remember that all of these archetypes live within us, especially for those of us with significant Scorpio placements. That scorpion can come out sometimes when we feel afraid, when we're in survival, when we need to protect ourselves, when the inner child feels threatened. But I know, especially if you're listening to this podcast, that you have the phoenix integrated as well. The ability to be with the difficulty, the challenge, to see that you're in survival, and to instead learn how to transmute that into gold, into light, into love. And when we have Scorpio or Pluto or Mars activated significantly in our own personal charts or in current chart, we're here to learn how to be these alchemists, to learn the power of love rather than the love of power. In so many ways, I think our whole human experience can be summed up to that specific morsel, to learn how powerful love is from the heart, not from the ego. So as we navigate these deep waters of Scorpio season, as we near Samhain, the time of our ancestors when the veil is so thin, we also navigate this Grand Trine in water between Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer, and Mars and Mercury in Scorpio. And this exacts again on October 28th. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn all form a very exact Grand Trine in water, while Mercury in Scorpio begins to form an exact trine with Neptune retrograding in Pisces at 29 degrees. On the 29th, right when Mercury shifts into Sagittarius, it begins opposing Uranus, which is currently retrograde in Gemini. It's at 0 degrees Gemini. It's getting ready to shift back into Taurus until it officially crosses into Gemini next year. And then on October 31st, of course, we have Samhain, we have Halloween, the thinning of the veil. And then on November 1st, Venus in Libra opposes Chiron retrograde in Aries. So this week really bridges the mystical and the material. Water and fire, feeling and truth. We have this Grand Trine in water that is active and will continue to be over the next week. And then we have this opposition between Mercury and Uranus and Sagittarius and Gemini. We have Venus and Libra opposite Chiron and Aries. So there's this air and fire patterning that's within this Grand Trine as well. After weeks of intensity and relational recalibration, the Grand Trine in water really offers an opportunity to just pay attention, to feel. You don't necessarily have to make sense of what you're feeling. This is a time to feel. This is Scorpio season. This is deep and penetrating. It might not make sense. The veil is thin. Our unconscious is super malleable and available, especially with Mercury and Mars in Scorpio over these last few days of that transit of Mercury in Scorpio. It's important to not let your emotions take hold, but to simply feel them and be with them, to let them be seen and witnessed. We have to remember that these emotional layers have been buried for a long time, and what they really want and need are recognition. Before we act from them, feel them. Healing doesn't always mean doing something. Sometimes it's the softening that creates empowerment and movement. And as Mercury shifts from Scorpio into Sagittarius and begins that opposition to Uranus and Gemini, our minds begin to quicken, our awareness expands. We might be able to access more truth, more understanding, more deeper understanding of our emotional experience. You might be feeling just like you're sort of in flow. It might not be an easy flow. It might not be comfortable necessarily, but you're just sort of floating. That's a Grand Trine in water. You might be feeling a lot, but not really feeling this urge to dissect it or make sense of it. That is exactly where you're meant to be. You might feel like you're moving through water, like things aren't necessarily happening or taking shape, but you're kind of okay with it. That's this Grand Trine in water. I did a launch this summer and I've just been chilling for a month. I've, of course, been working with my clients and doing my podcast and ideating this next offering, my group cohort that's happening in 2026. But besides that, I have not felt the urge to launch something or create something or even work on the details. I've just been feeling and processing and integrating what occurred during eclipse season for me. I'm spending some time in the Midwest and I'm just enjoying fall and the seasons and the cold air and the festivities and all of the things that I love and have always appreciated about this time of year. I've really been slowing down. As we enter Scorpio season, we are entering the season of death and decay, not in this morbid way, but in this essential way, in the ways that compost and feed new life. We have to let things die. We have to let the process of decay and dissolving of what was, releasing and letting go so that it may transform into something new. We have to release our grip, our need to control the process, and truly trust that what's dying, what is decaying, will become compost that will feed this new life. And this is autumn in the Northern Hemisphere. This is the process of preparation for winter, for gestation, for rest, recalibration, preparation. So if you feel this desire to slow down as well, that's natural. If you feel these layers of grief emerging or deeper emotions, that is natural and normal for this season. Things that have been gestating beneath the surface might want to be spoken this week as Mercury leaves Scorpio and enters Sagittarius. You might start to gain awareness around what you've been feeling over the last few weeks with this journey of Mercury in Scorpio, Mars in Scorpio, this Grand Trine in water. And then at the end of the week, we have Venus opposing Chiron. We get to face the mirror of love again. We're back in that Venusian, that relational work, how our wounds and worth intertwine, how our healing happens through mirror work, through connection, through relationship, through honesty, not avoidance. And all of this culminates under the veil of Samhain, celebrating death, celebrating what was, celebrating the past, celebrating the wisdom and the healing that has occurred, where we get to reclaim lost parts of self and listen more deeply to what still wants to live within us. So at the beginning of this week, October 28th and 29th, we have this still very active Grand Trine in water. Mars, Mercury in Scorpio, Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, both retrograde, and Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer is connecting us to our roots, to our emotional safety, our sense of belonging, our mothering, what we need to feel connected, to feel safe, to feel like we belong, so that we can expand those spaces. We can trust a bit deeper. We can allow ourselves to open more. Saturn and Neptune in Pisces retrograding. They left Aries. They're re-entering Pisces until February of 2026. They're having us look at, where are we still living in illusion? Where are we trying to escape? Where are we afraid to take the reins of our lives? Where do we need to deeper into trust more? This is the paradox between surrender and control. And it always comes back to the opposite side of Pisces, which is groundedness. When we can be present with what we're experiencing, we don't need to escape, but we can be present with the immense expansion that's around us always, the interconnectedness of all things. We can access what we truly desire in Pisces while we're in the body. And this is the access of Virgo and Pisces together. And then on the other side, we have, like I said, Mercury and Mars and Scorpio, digging through the trenches of our emotional landscape, having us look at what has informed our present, our relationships, our patterns, how we move through the world, our work, what has been unconscious, and how can we bring it forward? So you can see how this Grand Trine is big work. Trines are supportive, harmonious aspects. However, when it's in water, it's going to be deep feeling. So for those of us that struggle to feel or have developed incredibly intelligent defense mechanisms around feeling too much, or store and hold trauma around times when we felt too much and didn't have the resources we needed, it can feel like a lot. But it is so important. I honestly, truly believe that the golden key to what we desire in life is held beneath the emotions we are afraid to be with. We're afraid to hold. We're afraid to acknowledge. And that's almost always grief or shame. These emotions that are so sticky and deep and terrifying in some ways. But they are the great alchemizers. This is movement through emotion, not around it. Mars in Scorpio activates depth. It's this drive to transform, to act from emotional intelligence rather than reactivity. Trining Jupiter in Cancer, the heart expands. We feel more, sense more, open more. Trining Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, supporting structure, grounded healing, emotional discipline, embodied empathy. This is where we get to somatically integrate, where we get to align our actions with our deeper truths, healing through presence, devotion, being with our emotions. So like I said, this Grand Trine in water, the first few days of this week, you don't necessarily need to do anything but be with what's surfacing. Before Mercury shifts into Sagittarius, it's going to push us a little bit to process the remnants of its journey through Scorpio. So anything that's happened over the last few weeks that has felt challenging or emotional, or anything that you struggled to maybe access within you, might come to the surface. I really, really, really encourage you this week to think before responding. When Mercury shifts into Sagittarius, like it does on the 29th, it's going to immediately oppose Uranus. Uranus is disruptive. It is shocking. It is change. It is revolutionary. And Mercury's journey through Scorpio probably kicked up quite a bit. There might be a lot that got sort of suppressed or revealed. This might get ignited when Mercury shifts into Sagittarius on the 29th. So this is mental ignition, disruption. We might crave freedom, new stories, new perspectives. We might feel this fire to change things, to understand things, to speak our minds. Mercury moving into a fire sign is always a bit interesting, especially after it's been sort of locked up in this scorpionic space where it's felt like it maybe couldn't say something, or if it did, it was the wrong thing, or it was super reactive. Moving into Sagittarius, hopefully we can access the higher mind the higher perspective, but it can also be loud and maybe abrasive and reactive in its own ways. This might bring about restlessness or even sudden clarity, a breaking open of truth where rigidity once stood. Right before Mercury enters Sagittarius and opposes Uranus, it trines Neptune. So there might be a lot of unconscious material that surfaces this week, a lot of realizations around where you're living in illusion, where you're afraid to take action, or where you have been operating from a space that has kept you safe, but maybe not embodied or empowered. This transit, although it's very short, is also incredibly powerful for us to break through beliefs we once held. This might be major realizations that occur collectively. It might be personally in your own life. You might have breakthroughs in thought, belief, communication, shifts in perception, perspective, quantum level awareness. This could be a day where revelations surface. This could be shocking, disruptive. Either way, it's not a time to necessarily react or respond. It is a time to observe. As we enter October 31st, it's Samhain, it's Halloween. The veil thins between worlds, between lives, between what was and what will be. Samhain marks the midpoint between the fall equinox, the autumnal equinox, and the winter solstice. This is the descent into the fertile dark. It's a time of ancestral remembrance, deep reflection, inner stillness, inner honoring. It's a time of release, honoring what has died and preparing for what's ready to root. This is a perfect time to do a ritual around what has been. It could be an ancestral altar. It could be time to do an offering to your ancestors, something that you know your lineage utilized or preyed upon. This is a time to rework how we meet endings, meeting them with reverence, not fear, to rework how we meet death, integrating our own shadow, what has been lost within us, what we've fragmented, what we've pushed aside, what we have separated out from within ourselves, and welcoming it back in. And someone I really appreciate who does a lot of grief work and death work is Francis Weller. I've talked a lot about him on this podcast. And instead of a card pull today, I want to leave you with an excerpt from his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And he says, our refusal to acknowledge grief and death has twisted us into a culture riddled with death. Death rattles through our streets daily. In school shootings, suicides, murders, overdoses. Hillsides are stripped of trees, leaving homeless the countless others who once dwelled within the canopies, along creek beds and in the underbrush. Oceans are mined and emptied of fish. Death pervades our culture, becoming a presence we cannot contain or ultimately honor. Bringing grief and death out of the shadows is our spiritual responsibility, our sacred duty. By doing so, we may be able to feel our desire for life once again and remember who we are, where we belong, and what is sacred. We're taught how to endure grief, but not how to let it ripen you. Nature's not always improving itself. Sometimes it goes through profound periods of decay and destruction, death. Our psyches were shaped in the context of nature over hundreds and thousands of years. So why wouldn't our psyches also be akin to the patterns of nature? We need the darkness. In the absence of that relationship to the darkness, we don't understand times of descent. When we're taken down below the ground, grief, loss, depression, collapse. We don't know how to relate to it, so we keep scrambling to get to the surface, the light, to where we can see what's going on. But what the psyche, the soul, invites us to do during times of loss is to develop a second kind of sight, to learn how to see in the darkness and recognize the holiness in that space. And this is our great work. And this is honestly why I created my mentorship program, because I am of Pluto first house. I understand these cycles of death and rebirth so intimately. I live them daily. They are a part of me in a way that is so tactile and tangible and real. And what I've noticed is that sometimes we get lost in that space of darkness. I always see this with my clients when they land in a descent, the light turns out. Your intuition might be dulled. You might be scrambling to find ways to access the light again. But the entire time, what's being asked of you is to develop that second sight, like Francis Weller talks about. That spark of life, that deepened faith, intuition, the listening. And I see this time and time again in my mentorship container when women surrender within that space at the bottom of the descent. Incredible miracles occur. And the light turns on, and all of a sudden you can access new layers of understanding and learning and faith and flow and ease. And we are in a natural descent right now. It is the season of descending into the fertile soil, into the darkness. I have one space left for mentorship this year. I have a few spaces open for clarity calls. If you're interested and you don't find a time, go ahead and email me. I'm doing clarity calls for private mentorship. This is a very, very, very intimate, close, one-on-one container where we work together through a descent. Many of you are in descents. I can feel it. I've talked to many of you. You're looking for that second sight. And within this container, we walk through that descent together, honoring the cycles, honoring the timing, honoring the surrendering, and developing together that second sight. Basically, this is a container of transformation. It's a soul level, soul-led, spirit-led container. And it never ceases to amaze me, the transformation that occurs when I get to work with women in this way. I'm so, so, so grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your devotion. Thank you for sharing and rating and reviewing this podcast. If you're here every week, I love you. I see you. I appreciate you. If this is your first time, welcome. As always, take what resonates, release what does not. I hope you all have a beautiful, beautiful week. Happy descending.